It's just not fair. It's just not fair. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. It's just not fair. I hear these words shrieking from my attorneys. I hear them shrieking from my grandchildren. I remember saying them. I was a child. I remember repeating them to my children. I remember even crying out to my God, our Father. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. I know it's not fair. I can hear the words from the back of the truck with my two grandchildren, not even 2, 3 weeks ago, and time over time. And I think you can remember these words too when you were a child. I think you can remember these words when you're grown up children. I think you can remember these words when you're teenage children. I mean, if you have children, you've never missed these words. If you've been a child and you have any decent memory skills at all, you've heard these words. If you're a boss, if you're a preacher, if you're a teacher, I don't know that you can go through life and not hear these words that echo, echo, echo. It's just not fair. And what I want to talk to you about today is this idea, and I want to acknowledge it to you that a person of my position of life or age or success, if you will, we have this echoed sentiment in our heads just like anybody else. I just think that sometimes some people deal with inequity differently than others. Nora, my 4-year-old granddaughter, deals with it in one way. And Judah, my 6-year-old grandson, deals with it in another way. But I don't think that we can ever run from the fact that our hard wiring, right, our wired differentiality, that we all have some cognizant understanding of what fairness or righteousness is. Now, this isn't a diatribe on how to make you more fair or less fair or rally the troops about unfairness and rise up against the man. This is really not that at all. This is just this call to arms of who we are as wired differently people, who we are as people who seek righteousness, who see unfairness, who feel the wrath of unfairness. Well, it's not fair, Papa. They get ice cream. It's not fair, Papa. That place is one way or another. It's not fair, Papa. They got a longer period of recess. Judah, on the other hand, is, man, it's just not fair, bro. Bro, that's not fair. That, bro, Judah really doesn't have an answer for my 6-year-old grandson. He doesn't have, and I love the name Judah because we're going to talk about Judah all day long today. The nation of Judah, the territory of Judah. We're going to talk about Amos, man. But my grandson's name is Judah. Amos was a prophet back in 8 BC who came down from the hills of Georgia and the mountains, maybe. I don't know. But this Judah, the first Judah, comes down over, Amos comes over the country of Judah. And he declares unfairness. He declares unrighteousness. And we're going to talk about that. And what's it leads us to this component of my Judah, my 6-year-old Judah. He knows what's unfair. He's going, that's not fair, bro. That's not fair. Now, he's not going to really give you an answer of what is fair at that point, but he knows that's unjust. That's not right. Nora, on the other hand, she's 4. She's going to say it's not fair. But for some reason, Nora takes a little more action in unfairness. Nora realizes that there's 4 little babies in the nursery, and her mom's doing daycare. Kendra is my daughter, and she's a brilliant, beautiful, godly woman, and she runs a church school area, and I don't know the name of it. Forgive me. But she's bouncing back and forth with little bigger kids, smaller kids. And there's this nursery. And I got this image of little Nora one time. And the babies weren't getting enough attention. They were probably understaffed or something. And little Nora was in there helping her mom or maybe even another teacher out. And I got a video of her going from baby to baby to rocking one baby and then rocking another baby. And then there's another baby over there wasn't getting attention. And it just wasn't fair. And so she went running all the way over to that baby and she rocked that baby. And I had this image of her rocking one baby with one hand and rocking another baby with another hand and maybe even rocking another one with her foot. And she made her rounds to all the little children in the nursery, right? And making sure each one of those children got touched and were attended to and got equal amount of reciprocity of fairness or equal amount of reciprocity of righteousness of the attention or love of a 4-year-old child. Not fair. Judah knows it's not fair. Why someone gets 2 scoops of ice cream instead of 1. Nora knows that's not fair. Nora knows that each baby should get equal amount of love, and she's going to do everything she can do it. Because here's the thing: we are hardwired with righteousness in us. God has created us in His own image. He says, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We are created from birth in His image. Now, we don't all have Christ in us at the time we die, but we all are created in His image with the capacity to have Christ in us. And so that hardwiring in us is our ability to say, that's not fair. I see that that's not right. I see there's inequality. I see there's inequity in that regards. I was at a track meet yesterday with a track meet, high school track meet. I went to see a good friend, a partner in Paceserve Systems. His name is Sam. He's a brilliant man. I've talked about him several times, probably on the show, in and out. I love him. I love his family. And he has a middle son by the name of Larson. And he's actually the young man on the image that was leading into this hype of this show this morning. His name's Larson. And he's an amazing man. He's worked very hard to throw the discus and the shot put, and that's his thing. He plays football, but discus and shot put are things that he really wants to excel in life. And he's worked really hard. And we were at a track meet in, I think, Sturgis, Michigan, and they were Sturgis and Niles and Edwardsburg. Those 3 little communities. Not little. I think Sturgis is, I don't know what size. It doesn't matter. There's 3 schools all competing: girls track, boys track, all come together. Softball was going on, and it was just like, it was great to see all these young people competing and having generally a good time. But I was there to see Larson, and I was hanging out with the father, Sam. And it was interesting to me that he was clearly a standout out of some 20 young men out there throwing this shot put and discus. And we got over to the discus. He won the shot put pretty handily, but he went over to the discus, which was just something I think he really wants to compete in at a national level. And most of the kids they were good, but they weren't right in the throwing league that he was in. Right? Some things just aren't fair. Some kids are born naturally differently, and Larson is one of these kids that at least had the genetics that he could build on, and he's worked real hard at it, and he really stood out in that audience. But when we went to the discus, this cage was built so if the discus gets away, it doesn't hit the people standing around watching the discus as it flies, right? You wing it like this, and then swirls, and then it goes out about 100 and some feet. And if it gets loose from a flip, it can hit the left or it can hit the right. Well, this cage is built so that if it gets loose, it doesn't hit anybody on the crowd. Well, all these discus throwers are right-handed, but when Larson got up there, the guy that's the proverbial guy that's supposed to win this event gets up there and he's doing his warm-ups, and he's got like 2 or 3 warm-ups, and he steps up there and the crowd's all watching him, and it's like, can't wait to see this kid throw. And ting, right off the side of this cage. And it hit hard, man. People were like getting back, and it just ting, and the discus goes flying out into the little bit of shrapnel here and there, and it says flying, and of course it's not going to count. And he takes another throw. Ting. Oh my gosh, this kid that's supposed to win it hands down, this kid that really supposed to excel in this regard for all the right reasons, just can't get it out of this gate, this cage, this arena. Well, it turns out that Larson is actually not throwing right hand, but he's throwing left hand. He's throwing left hand. And the cage was built for right-handed throwers. It doesn't even comprehend. It's just not fair because this kid is supposed to win this whole thing, and the system is set up against him because he is throwing with his left hand, not his right hand. And every time he gets off just a little bit course with his left hand, ting, ting. I got to hand it to this kid, Larson. He didn't let it rattle him too much. The event starts, and he gets 2 throws, and then he gets 2 more throws, and the longest throw wins the whole thing. He steps up there, has to beat like 123 feet, an everyday toss for him. Ting! Crowd's like, oh my gosh, this kid's supposed to be the state champion. He can't get it out of the arena. The arena was built for right-handed throwers. He's left-handed. It's like the world's never seen a left-handed thrower, but this school's old. It's antiquated. It's like, I don't know, but it was not fair at all. It just wasn't fair. He gets another throw. Ting. The crowd's almost laughing at him. And he's a little bit distracted, but not broken. His father's sitting there and just shaking his head and kind of laughing. And I'm like, man, I'm not even this kid's father. I'm not even from this state, let alone involved in any of these children's sports, regardless of anything on a regular basis. But I'm thinking, my gosh, my God, this isn't fair. His very last throw. Made some adjustments. I thought he was going to throw right-handed. Made some adjustments, cranked one out there 151 feet and won the record, walked off. And all I could say, man, is that just wasn't fair. It wasn't fair for Nora, right? It wasn't fair for those children in the nursery. It wasn't fair for Judah the Barracuda. It wasn't fair for me. It wasn't fair for you. And Amos is clearly making clear that God wants justice. God wants righteousness. I want justice in my life, and I want to tell you how we're going to make it fair. I'm going to tell you exactly what's happening in my life and your life right now.
Preview. Todd is not only a remarkable, successful 30-year titan in business with having multiple businesses that generate multiplied millions of dollars.
And if that plan happens to be to build $1 million company, which I can help you do.
But he's humble. He's a man of God. He's a family man. The world's news organizations are built on everything but positivity.
He is an influential entrepreneur and business speaker for over 30 years.
I've got to forecast. I've got to pronounce. I've got to project. I've got to share with you my ideas, my vision, my goals for not only myself, but for you.
That's why he's came up with his incredible concept of taking and creating a platform for people that are wired differently.
And you got to understand that your habits of your person and your habits of your business and your habits of your spirituality have to lead to the North Star of who you are. We need to figure out who we want to be in life.
we're wired differently. We're misfits of this world. Welcome to the second half of the Wired Differently experience. This is the part where we teach a little bit on the stories we build on in the beginning of this show today. It's just not fair is the topic of today. And today we're going to be talking about what Amos 5:24 was talking about when he said, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. God never said it was going to be fair. God never said, hey, I'm making all of this and it's all going to be equal. He just didn't say it. You can look in the Bible. In fact, he is the author of, I guess, unequality, because he had to bring Christ here to deliver equality. And I know you have heard me say this in many times before, but I'm going to say it again today. The Christ was the first chief diversity officer to ever walk this planet. Right? Christ came here to fulfill some form of equity in this world. He came here for everybody. The Old Testament and the New Testament are, different time periods. The Old Testament was before Christ walked on this earth, and it was calling for Christ to come walk on this earth and be the deliverer, the Messiah, right? Yahweh God said his son was coming. The prophets taught that Jesus was coming. And then this whole Old Testament is the before Christ is born, before he comes as the Messiah, as the Old Testament says would come. And then Jesus finally shows up, fulfills all the prophecies, becomes Christ, becomes the Messiah, and that's what delivers the New Testament. Very simple. Before Christ was born, they were killing sheep and sacrificing lambs and all kinds of animals for their sins. But when Christ came, he came as God's son in the flesh and died on the cross. And when he died on the cross and bled for us, he stood in there for all of our sins and our iniquity. But here's the real thing, that Christ came for all of us. Black, white, Chinese, Spanish American, right? Palestinians, Jewish, right? Hezbollah. I mean, he came for everybody. And the Old Testament wasn't prepared for that. At least the Jewish nation wasn't prepared for that. And the Jewish nation acknowledged that Christ was going to come someday. It still does acknowledge it. The Jewish faith that we hear about on the news all the time, the Israelites and all the Israel people in the Jewish faith, they say Christ is coming because the Old Testament says he's coming, but they're still looking for him. They haven't picked their dude yet, right? Because the faith that Israel was built around really felt like in Jesus's time that Christ was going to come back on a white stallion to save literally the Jewish nation and only the Jewish nation. But Christ, God, did a no look and said, no, I'm coming back on a donkey and I'm here for everybody. And therein lies the rub. The Jewish nation would say, well, that's not fair. We are your chosen ones. God's never denied that the Israel people are not his chosen people. And Christians would say, yes, Israel is his chosen nation. Those are his chosen people. But see, this is where Amos comes in 8 BC, because back before Christ in the Old Testament, 8 BC is before Christ. So this is like the 8th century, right, before Christ. So here's the thing, the countdown, so 8 BC, 7 BC, 5 BC, 3 BC, 2 BC, 1 BC. Then you have the year after Christ, and then year 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're at the year after Christ, 2024. But Amos was just a farmer up in the northern part of the Israel nation. And the Israel nation was really the first biblical tribunal nation, the world leader of, it was God's chosen people. He had all this rule, this kingdom, and it was broken into the north and the south. And the north part of Israel had 10 tribes, and the south part of Israel had 2 tribes, that predominantly the tribe of Judah. My grandson's name is Judah, the tribe of Judah. Well, the northern 10 tribes were problematic. They became sinful and arrogant and boastful and not what God had created for them to be. And there comes out of the hills a man by the name of Amos. And I want to take you to Amos because he's not a person that, I mean, he's us, I think. I think he's really us. Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. Why do you long for the day of the Lord? Amos is saying this to all of Israel, predominantly the north part of Israel, with the 10 tribes that are full of sin and debauchery and not being fair, not doing things accurately to the people that were poor. The injustice was being served to those that didn't have. And the 10 tribes in the northern part of Israel were debauchery. Wasn't the case in the tribe of Judah, the southern part of Israel, which now is still Israel. It's not as big, but it's around Jerusalem, and Israel is still the southern piece, what's left of the remnants of the Israel world and kingdom that God has blessed. But see, God is fair. God is omnipotent. And so the northern part, the 10 tribes in the northern half of this large, look it up in a map, this large sector of Israel, the same place, same continent, same everything by the Gaza strips, all the land's still there. It's just broke up differently. Israel has this little spot when it used to have all this, has this little spot, what's left in the tribe of Judah, the area of Judah. God told Amos to go to the north and tell them, right? The day of the Lord is coming, and it's not light, it's dark. Woe to you who long, because Amos comes out of the mountains in Judah as a poor farmer, happy poor farmer, and he becomes a prophet. He says, listen, bro, up there in the north, you 10 tribes, you got problems. Woe to you who long for the day of the Lord. Why do you long for the day of the Lord? That day will be darkness, not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion only to meet a bear, as though he entered his own house and rested his hand on the wall, and then a snake bit him. Will not the day of the Lord be darkness, not light? Pitch dark, without a ray of brightness. I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. So I'm going to make this pretty easy for you because I have spent some time on this. And what Amos is trying to say, man, God has called me out of the hills. I'm just a sheep farmer. I don't really smell that good, but I'm happy. I got family. I got things going on. And I don't like the city life. I don't like all this stuff, but God's called me to come down here. And here's what he told me to tell you. Listen, bro, you got problems. You think that the day of the Lord is light just because David conquered Goliath, just because Nehemiah, all these people have won and God has won all these battles and won and won and won and won. But the day of the Lord, it's at hand for you, you 10 tribes north of Israel. It's the day of the Lord is coming for you is not light. I'm here to tell you it is darkness. And I find that particularly interesting because to my knowledge, anytime I heard the day of the Lord, it was always a good thing. Well, I think it probably was a good thing. God let darkness ascend on the 10 tribes of Israel because it was rotten. It stunk. The offerings weren't real. The music was fake. It was only about them and their wealth and their success. And Amos says, man, God's coming. And he did. The Assyrian nation invaded the Israel nation. The Babylonians took over the whole northern part of Israel. All 10 tribes were decimated, never to ever return. They fled throughout the entire world. Some came down to northern or to southern Israel. Some went all over the world. The Babylonians have taken over all of that. The pagan gods, the whole worse than even what the Israelites were doing in their fake falsehood narrative of what God was. But Amos's message is that righteousness, listen, that justice will roll on like a river and righteousness like a never failing stream. And that is what God has promised to us. I mean, this is a crazy story and I can't verify it. I wasn't there. I just choose to believe that the Bible is emphatically true from the beginning, from the front to the end. And I believe that it's my personal choice. Because if I start taking pieces out of the Bible and cutting and pasting them, the things that I just want to believe and I don't want to believe, and then I'm just creating my own Bible. I'm just creating my own belief structure. I'm just creating this idea of rationalization. So I would challenge you to pick a side here. I think you should choose the Bible to follow the whole Bible in reality. And I think you should understand that some things in the Bible aren't going to probably make sense with the way you think things should be. Maybe that it's not fair. But life isn't fair. My mom told me that on more than one occasion. And God's saying the same thing here. You haven't been fair. Judah knows when it's not fair. And he's not really willing to do too much about it, but call it out because his body's telling him it's just not fair. Nora doesn't really call it out so much. She just kind of goes to work at it and starts to try to make things fair, especially if Judah points it out. And I think it's ironic that my grandson's name is Judah. I don't know if Nora is a biblical name. Maybe it is. But I wanted to share with you this verse, Amos 5:24. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. God is fair. God will never let you down. People will let you down. People are not fair. God is so fair that he punished his entire nation so severely that it never recovered, to send the message to the rest of the world that God will be fair. So that I would teach this today about the fairness of God. The fact that he does see inequality in and about his own people. He does see unfair. He does see the wrongs of even the people that are his people. You as Christians, you as wired differently people, you as misfits of this world are called to a higher calling. We have Christ in us. We are able to recover from sins. We are able to rebuke some of the bad things that have happened in our life, and we are able to deal with all those things because we have Christ in our life to deal with them. But if we continue, right, if we continue to do the same things over and over again, then are we not just like the 10 tribes of Israel? Right? He said, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are stench to me, even though you bring me burnt offerings. They're not real. I will not accept them through you, even though you bring choice and fellowship offerings. I will not regard of them. Away with the noise of your songs. The songs you sing may have my name in them, but they're not really for me. They're just showy. They're just like, hey, look at me. I could be a Christian. I could be God. I could be all part of this. Hey, come over here. My music is really good. Hey, away with it. Righteousness is a never failing stream. Justice will roll on like a river. The interesting thing I saw in this verse too is that I think that sometimes we try hard to cover up for not being real. And I think God has a comedic relief to him here as I close this. He says, Why do you long for the day of the Lord? That day will be darkness, not light. Because he's saying, why did you long for something that you have never really honored? You've been a fake, you've been a phony, you haven't been real, you've been exhausting your resources, you've been idol worshiping, you have been adulterous, you've been purging yourself with drink, all these bad things that we stood for just because you could, and I made you strong at one point. I'm taking it away because your day of the Lord will be darkness, not light. You are not going to be rewarded anymore. He says it will be as though a man fled from, like, why are you doing all this? Because it's not going to work. Like a man who fled from a lion, running from a lion, is like, whew, and he turns around the corner and like, oh my gosh, there's a bear. And the bear eats him, right? Or the man who runs from a lion, whew, God save me. Then there's a bear, and the bear like goes to get him, and whew, he gets away from the bear, and he turns around, he finally gets home, he takes a rest, and there's a snake that comes around the corner, kills him, right? I think God's being funny here. I mean, it's like you go through all these motions as human beings and people, and you complain and you moan about being unfair and this and that, but you're not really becoming fair in your own life. You're not being fair to God. You're not being righteousness or real in your walk in your faith. You're a hypocrite. But you try so hard, but it's not going to make stake because it's going to be dark, not light. It's like a man running from a lion, only to be saved, but the bear eats him. That's funny. But if he escapes the bear and he gets home, turns on the TV, puts his arm on the rest, and a snake comes around the chair and that's funny, right? Like you go through all this work, all this time, everything in your life. God says you do all you want to do, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna come. If you're not righteous, you're not righteous. If you're a faker, you're phony, you're a faker, you're phony. I'm like, you really need to change, or the bear or the snake or the lion, it's ultimately gonna get you. God's hand will be delivered in some regard. Just like the 10 tribes of Israel. Babylonian came, conquered, changed the landscape of the world forever, just to share that message with us today. Hey, everybody, don't forget that Amos told us that justice will roll on like a river and will never leave us like a falling stream. We're here for you at Wired Differently. I want you to understand that it's a mindset, mission, movement, and ministry. And get to wireddifferently.com and type in your promo code WIRED15. Get your t-shirt, Wired Differently America. Support this mindset, mission, and movement. Mindset, mission, movement, and ministry. Do that for me. Wear your pride on your shirt. We got all kinds of shirts, faith shirts, Wired Differently shirts, probably 70 different types. I think it's important that we show the world that we are wired differently because we do believe in Christ and we do want this accountability of living our life in more of a fair and righteous way, the way God has called us to honor him. God bless you guys. Have a great day. It's been a great show, and we have one more day. I'll see you tomorrow.